Hey everyone! We are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content and it is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button right now as we proceed. Subscribe to this channel right now and do not scroll away, because the story we are about to tell you today starts with 8 words from the greatest tennis player who ever lived and ends somewhere that will completely change the way you understand what Eala represents, not just to the sport of tennis, not just to the Philippines, but to every person who has ever been told that where they come from means the dream is too big. Roger Federer looked at a 20-year-old girl from Quezon City and said, "She is the future of world tennis." 8 words. From the man who spent 20 years defining what world tennis actually looks like at its highest and most beautiful level. 8 words that broke the internet, split the analytical community down the middle, and sent 100 million people in the Philippines into the kind of collective emotional eruption that most nations only experience when their flag is raised at an Olympic podium. But here is the thing that nobody has properly told you yet. The story behind why Federer said it is even more extraordinary than the quote itself. So let us start at the very beginning, because this story only makes complete sense when you understand where it comes from. The Philippines is not a tennis country. That is not a criticism. It is the specific and honest reality that every Filipino athlete who has ever held a racket has had to wrestle with throughout their entire career. Tennis in Southeast Asia has historically been the sport of privilege and country clubs, of children who grow up watching Wimbledon on satellite television and nurturing dreams that coaches quietly tell them are admirable but perhaps not realistic. The Philippines produces boxing champions of the absolute highest global caliber. It produces basketball players with extraordinary heart and skill. It produces resilient, creative, mentally unbreakable athletes across multiple disciplines. But Grand Slam champions, that conversation had simply never gotten off the ground. There was no blueprint. There was no predecessor. There was no Filipino tennis player who had stood on a major court against the best players in the world and made the result genuinely uncertain. Until Alexandra Mano Eala was born on May 23, 2005 in Quezon City, and a grandfather named Bobby Monago put a racket in her hand at 4 years old and started something that would eventually make Roger Federer reach for his phone. The foundational chapters of her story are the ones that make the Miami chapter and the Dubai chapter and the Federer chapter possible to understand. At 13 years old, she left home and moved to Spain to enroll at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, the institution built on the philosophy of relentlessness, of grinding through discomfort, of converting talent into sustainable excellence through work that never stops and never becomes comfortable. Think about what 13 looks like in that context. Foreign language, foreign culture, thousands of miles from family. The task of becoming a professional tennis player at an institution where the standard is set by one of the most ferocious competitors the sport has ever produced. She did not just survive that environment. She absorbed it. She graduated from the academy in 2023 carrying a mental architecture, the specific psychological infrastructure of a player who has been tested in environments that most athletes never encounter, that would later allow her to stand on the biggest courts in the world against the best players in the world and not flinch when everything around her was screaming at her to do exactly that. The 2022 US Open Juniors was the first moment the broader tennis world received a signal that something genuinely different was happening. 17-year-old Eala won the girls' singles title, becoming the first Filipino in history to win a Grand Slam junior championship. Back in Manila, people wept. Fathers texted their daughters. A nation that had been waiting for a tennis champion across its entire modern history had finally found one. But junior championships are prologues, not stories. They tell you that the talent exists and that the foundation is real. They do not tell you whether the player can survive the specific and brutal transition from junior dominance to professional consistency, a transition that has ended promising careers at a rate that makes even the most optimistic talent evaluators cautious. Her early professional years were honest about that difficulty. Rankings in the 200s. Qualifying losses. Early exits at events nobody streams and few people beyond committed followers watch. The kind of grind that breaks most young players before the bright lights ever find them. She kept going. Every day. Because that is what the Nadal Academy installs. and once it is installed, it does not get uninstalled. Then came Miami 2025. And if you think you know this story because you saw the headlines, you do not know it. Because the full version of what happened at the Miami Open in March 2025 is so extraordinary that even in retrospect it requires a moment of deliberate processing before the magnitude settles properly. Eala entered the tournament as a wild card, ranked 140th in the world. A wild card is an organizational gift, a spot in the draw given to players who are not ranked highly enough to qualify, often extended to local favorites or crowd draws who bring energy and ticket sales to the early rounds. She was expected to provide some excitement, maybe win a round or two, and then exit gracefully while the tournament's seeded players got on with the actual competition. Then she beat Jelena Ostapenko, a former French Open champion. People started paying attention. Then she beat Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion, ranked 5th in the world. The whispers became shouts. And then, and this is the sequence of events that made every analyst on the planet do a double-take, she beat Iga Swiatek, world number 2, 5-time Grand Slam champion, the dominant force in women's tennis for years, in straight sets. As a wild card, breaking Swiatek's serve 8 times across 2 sets. Forcing 19 unforced errors in the first set alone. Back-to-back top 10 wins over the 5th and 2nd ranked players in the world, in the same tournament, while holding a wild card entry. That had not been done before by a Filipino player. That had barely been done by anyone at that ranking in recent memory. The Filipino fans who had traveled thousands of miles to be present for it, some of them spending savings they probably should not have spent, some of them taking time off work they could not really afford to take, erupted in scenes that went viral within hours. Filipino workers across the United States, overseas workers watching on phones during their breaks at strange hours of the night, parents, students, grandchildren of grandparents who had first put rackets in the hands of young Filipinos who dreamed too big, all of them were actually crying. And somewhere in the world, watching all of it unfold, was Roger Federer. He reached out. Not with a press release. Not with a formal announcement or a carefully managed media statement. With 8 words. She is the future of world tennis. That was it. And the response was unlike anything the WTA Tour had generated in years. The analytical community split immediately because great praise invites great scrutiny, and the scrutiny was fair and legitimate. One side pointed to the trajectory, ranked 147th at the start of 2025, ending the year ranked 50th, reaching a career high of world number 32 in early 2026, becoming the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA history, reaching a WTA 1000 semifinal, winning matches against multiple top 5 players, filling arenas in markets the sport has been trying to develop for decades. The data backed the hype at every level of examination. The other side raised questions equally legitimate and equally deserving of honest engagement. One brilliant tournament run does not define a career. Grand Slam titles require not just talent but consistency across the most grueling format in the sport. And the gap between a spectacular WTA 1000 run and the kind of sustained major dominance that earns a player a place in the conversation alongside Federer's designated successors is enormous and has swallowed more promising careers than anyone likes to count. Both sides were right. And the honest version of Alex Eala's story acknowledges both without collapsing into either uncritical worship or premature dismissal. The Australian Open 2026 main draw debut ended in a first-round loss to Alicia Parks, ranked 99th, in a match where Eala took the first set 6-love and then could not sustain the level for the full match as Parks found rhythm with a booming serve that generated 12 aces. That loss told a story within the story that matters for understanding exactly what Federer saw when he identified the future. He saw the talent and the ceiling, but he also saw the gaps. The serve is the project. Adding free points at critical moments, backing opponents off the baseline, shortening rallies that currently drain physical resources across a tournament week. These are the developments that stand between where Eala is right now and where the legends of the sport eventually stood. And after the Dubai quarter-final loss to Goff, she sat in the press conference and said something that revealed more about her character than any statistical line ever could. She said there is still definitely a gap between her and Coco. At 20 years old, in the era of social media performance and carefully managed public images, publicly acknowledging that a better player beat you and that you understand why. That is the specific self-awareness that Federer himself was known for throughout his career. He recognized it in her because he had lived it. He had been 20 years old once with gaps between himself and the players ahead of him, and he had closed those gaps not with bravado or denial but with the quiet, relentless intelligence of someone who could see himself clearly and work accordingly. The impact she has already generated on the Philippines before winning a single Grand Slam title is the dimension of this story that deserves its own chapter, because it is genuinely staggering in its scale. Since the Pacquiao era, no Filipino athlete has captured the nation's collective spirit the way Eala has. That comparison to Manny Pacquiao, one of the most beloved athletes in Philippine history, a man whose fights stopped traffic and united a country across regional and political divides, says everything about what a 20-year-old woman with a left-handed forehand has already become to a nation of over 100 million people. And she has not won a Grand Slam yet. What happens when she does? What happens when the moment that Federer's 8 words pointed toward actually arrives, when the trophy gets lifted, when the tears start flowing on every television screen and phone screen across the Philippines? If those 8 words broke the internet, that moment will stop it entirely. Is Alex Eala on track to become not just the greatest Filipino tennis player in history, a title she already holds, but one of the greatest women's players this sport has ever produced? The courts of 2026 and beyond will answer that question with the only currency that matters in professional tennis, which is results on the biggest stages when everything is on the line. But right now, with a career-high ranking of 32, a history-making trajectory, and the blessing of the greatest player who ever lived, the answer feels less like speculation and more like something that was always going to happen, something that a grandfather in the Philippines started building when he put a racket in a 4-year-old's hands and believed in something the rest of the world was not ready to see yet. Now we need your voice in this conversation more than ever. Do you believe Roger Federer is right? Is Alex Eala the future of world tennis? Drop your answer in the comments, drop Laban Alex if you believe in what she is building, and tell us how high you see her climbing before the year is over. Smash that like button to push this story everywhere it deserves to go. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss a single chapter of what is genuinely one of the most extraordinary athletic journeys in the history of professional sport, and share this video because this story deserves every audience it can find. The future is already here.